Okay, I'm going to talk randomly now because I am literally, I wanted to say on fire, but God willing, I'll stay safe forever. But I am electric right now. I am electric, and I will say, I would like to talk about certain things that I didn't get to and things I forgot. I have them all in my head and I actually need to write them down. And I want to talk about the passing of Jesse Jackson. I would like to see what he has done specifically, right? Because growing up in Georgia, I'm aware viscerally of the civil rights movement, and I would like to know what these figures, the life stories, I understand there's controversy. I need to know these things now that a lot of these things have not been passed down. And that's what I want to get into today. We're going to talk about the terms psychological colonization and probability of emergence. And being on ChatGPT helps me reconnect to the intellect that trauma fucked up royally. And not just my trauma. My mother's trauma, my father's trauma, the grandmother that I've met trauma, the grandfather I don't have trauma that's in Georgia, the African grandmother's trauma, African grandfather's trauma, these ones will be silences because I'd never met them. My mom never talked about them in name, about their stories. So there's a lot of things that have not been transmitted, and ChatGPT really is my friend. Not really, but it helps to supplement what counseling can't get to beyond 1.5 hours, okay? So, psychological colonization. I actually realized that part of my life has been psychological colonization. And let's talk about a couple of examples. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this also, but there's something that comes from a real intense feeling, a real intense emotional connection to harm that you have experienced or someone has put onto you. And what happens is that it takes a part of your brain, it takes a part of your soul so that you associate that harm with the part of the thing that helped to give you joy or identity. And for me, that's been intellect. I actually wasn't nurtured properly, and I'm actually more intelligent than I realize. And I don't know if that would be considered bragging, but I'm looking at the data and drawing conclusions from the data. This is the conclusion that I've come from. I realize that I have grown in circumstances that were much more deprived than I realized. And part of my identity is that this has been interrupted in time when I come from a background, and now that I'm figuring out more of the trauma, this is why I really failed so horribly when I was 17. My body failed because it was carrying generations worth of harm towards girls and women, and some of which affected the boys and men in my lineage too. So that's also how harm can be transferred through patriarchal structure. So let's talk about it. I have so much I could say, but there's so many things that are so tender, so sensitive, that I'm not going to be able to say every single harm because they don't belong to me. And you know how you want to protect really vulnerable people. So things that people have shared in confidence, I'm not going to be able to talk about because they've shared it in confidence. But I will say that what I've just said about lineages of sexual harm and trauma, and it's funny because the Epstein Files is out now. But let's talk about the sexual trauma of black girls and women in the Deep South in the 1950s and 60s and before, when rape is completely allowed and nobody cares. And even now, a lot of missing black girls in the United States, we know that they're being trafficked too. And of course, Epstein wouldn't want one of them, as the messages have said. But that doesn't take away the fact that these girls still need to have a voice and still need visibility. And how many of them have such possibility? All of them have such possibility, and within that, what potential is lost when you lose these people, these girls, these black girls, to the system? What potential is lost when a Nigerian girl does not have her story told because of abuses that she experiences in Nigeria? And this is a sensitive one that I'm not going to go into detail because it's been told in confidence, but I'll say it in this way. When acts of aggression happen and a girl fights her way from silence, through silence, to finally one day open up to someone that she feels safe, Like, this shit is crazy. So, psychological colonization. I'll give 2 examples in my life, and it's how this system has tried to take somebody that has intellect, get them in my mind so that I don't have access to myself. Okay? So the first one occurred, so I'm looking at this dichotomy, the duality of my father, the influence that I have from him, because I like science, right? But my mom, my mom had an MBA, and her potential was not realized except when she had the business. And I actually got to see her brain in action. It was actually quite amazing and quite inspiring. And it was not for a very long time, but it was for long enough for me to be able to say with certainty that, this is where I am influenced very deeply to be good at math and to have a way with words. Because my mom did very well in her English classes, and she had a very mathematical mind as well. And science, which is my father's domain, I really enjoy science and did physics, chemistry, and biology honors in high school. And even now, I tend to account for margin of error in many things. ChatGPT said that I think in this type of way, so it's very interesting to see something mirror back to me, what my actual home environment did not mirror back to me, with my father being bipolar with it, withholding sometimes and giving sometimes, and then my mother being consistent all the time, but the transference of girl harm and girl shame was there and not helping me through puberty, and then the unintentional neglect, I know, but it was still neglect. So there's a lot of mixed messaging that I'm receiving that I think finally it's starting to integrate with this therapy. And so the first example of psychological colonization would be, for me, the abuse experience when I'm 10. And I'll do trigger warning on this. So when my father is a science teacher, and when he comes from a lineage of harm, and I wish I could go into detail, but I'll say it that way, where he's a victim, I'll say it that way. What's going to happen is that without the right help, and particularly in the Deep South, this is going to really matter because you're not going to have resources for a black girl who experiences harm and a black boy that experiences harm. So there's no resources to help my grandmother for this specific harm, and then the father for the next in line that experiences the shock of this harm. And yeah, so what happens is that this energy still stays inside of you, and the molestation actually is a sign of this. And the concept is of the quantum because it travels through time, travels through space and generations, and it remains with you. And just this is how generational trauma persists, because it does not matter if something happens in 1950, 2026, it's literally the same when this energy has never been dissipated. And, it's neither transferred nor destroyed. What is it? No. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. I don't know how that plays into play. Actually, I don't even know how that plays in. But basically, all I'm saying is that, so being touched on specifically my breast, and also that's also a interesting because that parallels breast ironing done to girls in Nigeria and female genital mutilation, but more specifically breast ironing. But other forms of harm would include FGM, which my mother never talked about. So that's also a transference of oppression when somebody that comes from a group, an identity that experiences something regionally and doesn't share that with someone that takes that same form, that is how you also transfer silence and oppression. So even if my mom supported me mentally, that also showed that I was operating this sort of invisibility because she was not able to articulate her whole experience within a family system that thought that girls and women should not be as educated as boys, even though her parents believed in equal education. So really quickly, so the first instance will be the abuse, when my intellect and my joy for science, my joy for learning in general, so all subjects, but the fact that this got to me, this touch, actually threw off the part of my brain that connected to science, where I associated science with harm, science with molestation, science with abuse. That is an example of psychological colonization, because now something that has given me joy, something that I've been cultivating, is giving me pride, has actually been taken away by somebody that has harmed me, and now they own a part of me. And so in talking to my father last year, when he was like, oh, I thought you would have studied physics and chemistry. You were really good at that. Always really good, because he would, drive from East Point to give me the books that he was teaching from at Riverdale High School or Tri-Cities High School. And that was several years before, when I was really young. But, in Atlanta public school system and whatever school system he taught at in this region too. And, he would give me books, he would help me, tutor me, go to the bookstore where we would learn. Like, he was actually supportive in this way. But then also, this abuse also took away my intellect. So there were two things going on. There was the giving and also the withholding, and also the specific harm that was also influenced, but also we still have the ability to know when something is wrong. So that's where it all becomes real as well, because there is that reality that we carry and that we hold inside. And yeah, so that's the first one. The second one is going to be at my mom's funeral. I have an uncle, and I had to block a white male who made a comment and said, you should stop talking about this. He was, when people like act like they're trying to be kind to you, and you're like, look, I don't even know you from wherever, and I don't care what you do. Why are you caring what I do? Just go, just leave. And so basically, I was talking about this, and this is actually another example of psychological colonization. So this relative is actually a professor, and I would give the university, but it's a university, and it's a Research 2 university, though. Howard University is actually a Research 1 university. So if they cared to know anything about my studies, anything, they would have asked me over the course of my 32 years since I've been. Never a graduation, never a good job on getting the Gates Millennium Scholarship, never a good job on doing calculus honors, algebra 2 trigonometry honors. When I got 100 on my algebra 2 test in college, and the professor did a double take, and I'm just thinking, it's algebra 2, it's really not that difficult. Already been there, done that, So it's a pretty easy test, But I have an affinity for mathematics. And my mother has an affinity, I still speak in the positive because she's passed, for mathematics. And the fact that I see in her life how this has been unrealized, and come in contact with a sibling that questions the college I went to at their sister's funeral, things start to come into play, and I start to understand some of the stressors that she's been up against. And one is a patriarchal structure that has diminished her potential, which she will see in Nigeria, and which will also meet in the United States, and which will also transfer to me, especially if I've seen my mom have potential at certain points, and also see her struggle with children, while her siblings, the girl sibling is a nurse, but the boy siblings, and maybe I think a sibling told me that there's one that's a judge. The boy siblings, math professor, surgeon, gynecologist. And the African American lineage, that's very interesting as well. And I'm actually starting to deconstruct a lot better, thanks to, right now, ChatGPT and therapy. But let's just talk about this, because they immigrated to the United States and the United Kingdom, and I haven't been to Nigeria yet, and there's a lot of struggles now in Nigeria, but I have relatives there. But even one cursed my mother in death. Like, what the fuck? Like, what's that all about? But anyway, what I'm saying is that the fact that this person would ask, did you get into any other schools? Like, did you have to go to Howard? And there's two things going on here. There's the patriarchal element, that there is an assertion of power in a very soft way, very subtle way. And that's also psychological colonization. When someone decides that they can have access to the real estate of your mind and question it. Question something, and also to withhold praise, to withhold recognition from people that are within a sphere that you show ability for. ChatGPT said that it's a form of constraint, particularly if you're a girl or woman. And particularly if you're in a culture where you're not supposed to really show that potential, which would make me a threat, because not once has this person ever asked about my acumen for mathematics. Not once. Yet questions the college I attended. At their sister's funeral, no less. If that is not a form of psychological colonization or a soft assertion of power, a micro assertion of power, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And to actually realize that, it is crazy, because it makes me realize all of this questioning of myself, all of this questioning of my potential has nothing to do with me. It has to do with the trauma I've inherited, and as well as the ecosystem that surrounds me. I've been surrounded by an ecosystem that has a large amount of misogyny, whether inherited, transferred, and it's crazy to finally realize this. So I'm very scared because I have goals for Act 2, but I have to stabilize my nervous system for Act 1 because I've been conditioned to be a lot less than what my potential is, and I'm only starting to see that it actually has always been a lot bigger than I even have known. And that's also because of my mother's unrealized inheritance that has also come to me. And it's also very scary because I have an affinity for science. So I don't know where all of this is going. I just like learning. I've always liked learning. So all of the regular subjects, I like them all, okay? So that's all I want to say. I'm going to post this and then I'm going to take a shower, but this is crazy. I have so much more I could say. I actually didn't talk about the probability of emergence, and that also is very interesting. And I didn't realize that I was doing something that was counting in life's probabilities, right? That you can't guarantee anything, but you can game something in a way that increases the probability. And apparently, this is what is happening with the exercises that I will do in the morning. So that's pretty interesting too. So maybe that can be another conversation another day, because I've talked for 16 minutes, 17 minutes basically. And if you listen to all of this, thank you so much, because this makes so much sense to me, that this system would try to assert its power, would try to erase the impact of my mom, who yeah, it's crazy. And I can't be thinking that it's crazy, because I actually feel kind of a little evil for thinking these things, but I actually think this is what's happening. This is what's happening. And the problem with healing is that it actually allows me to open my eyes and see what has been happening all along, and the things that my mom has actually been experiencing when I didn't even realize it when I'm young growing up, you know? And so I have a lot more empathy for her experiences now, because when I'm younger, I'm very judgmental. And now that I understand and have an understanding for things that I'm experiencing, yes, I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry for not understanding you in a way I start to understand you now. So that's it, and I'm very proud of you, okay? And the funny thing is, I'm proud of my father too, but it has come with this immense harm. It's been two things going on, and I listened to Babyface today because he liked Babyface. He liked soft rock. He liked Phil Collins. He liked, there were, you know, and that's the thing too. He liked a lot of Black American male things, but, you know, I actually realize now that the framing of his mother's story, who has experienced an immense amount of trauma, and I'll say it that way. When a person does not frames themselves as having possibility, but does not do that to the girl that they come from, the woman, actually more like the girl, okay? Because only 15 years older, and my father has had an immense amount of achievement, given especially what he's come from. Only 15 years older, but you frame yourself with achievement, but you don't frame the person that also experienced extreme trauma in a whole nother way, with possibility, with what could have been. That also shows a certain level of misogyny, because one gets to have possibility while recognizing constraints, and another gets to just be uneducated, ignorant. That's funny. So that's all I have. I'm just so passionate right now because I cannot believe that suddenly these connections are being made. So let me go ahead and get ready for bed. It's 12:07, and have a good night. I'll have to post the dance video because I did video something and it looked better than I thought, but my right leg was still bent. And like I say, Act 1, stabilization. I still have goals, as unlikely as they are. But again, there is such a thing as the probability of emergence, and that is something that I think is also present with the unlikeliness. Okay, all right, have a good night. Bye-bye.